No way, she just dropped him with a single hip turn. The shout cut through, louder than the hollow echoes of the hangar. 4 recruits were now only 3, sprawled across the cold cement floor. Sarah stepped back, the beam of a flashlight slicing across her face. Yet her eyes stayed still, cold. Someone thought she was just a female sailor acting on instinct. But from the angle of the security camera, the light slid across the edge of her dress blues, revealing the faint lines of a tattoo. Seal wings wrapped around a covert insignia. Who is she really? And why is she on the flight line at midnight? A sudden flash of light cut through the thick darkness of the San Diego hangar, sharp as a blade. One of the 4 recruits had flicked on a flashlight, clicking it on and off as if to turn the vast space into a stage for their game. The beam skittered across the metal body of the UH-60, scattering into silver streaks that made the air shiver before locking squarely onto Sarah's eyes. She squinted, not from the glare, but as if she were measuring the distance between the light and the silence within her. Her shadow stretched long across the concrete, sharp and motionless, so precise it made even the ones holding the light falter for a second. But giggles quickly shattered the pause. One circled behind, boots echoing off the high ceiling like drumbeats. 2 others shifted forward, blocking the exit, weaving an invisible net. The last stood off to the side, swinging the flashlight with a grin, like a hunter savoring his prey. From where Sarah sat to the door was just 10 steps. But now, it felt like a mile. The path was locked tight by young bodies brimming with arrogance. The UH-60's blade loomed beside her like a wall of steel, its shadow adding weight to the air. Metal glinted under the jittering light, turning the hangar into a maze of shadows and beams. Sarah stayed seated. No furrowed brow, no wasted motion. She slid her meal container aside, unhurried, as if it were the only thing that needed doing. No one noticed her right hand loosen, fingers flexing gently with her breath. Small, ordinary, yet in her world, it was the start of something. A warm-up. The first step, before any storm. In her head there was no fear. Only math, cold and exact. Distance, velocity, angle, reaction time. With every step they took, another diagram sharpened in her mind. Exit 10 steps. Obstacles 2 tables, 1 empty fuel drum. Engagement range less than a meter. She had run this equation thousands of times. On Coronado's burning sand, inside sealed training rooms, under moonless desert skies. There, no flashlights, no laughter, only silence and opponents who never forgave mistakes. The beam jittered across Sarah's face, slid down to her worn uniform shoes. For a flicker, the faint outline of an eagle tattoo glimmered beneath her hem, then vanished. No one noticed, or maybe they were too busy enjoying their game. They thought she was cornered. They thought tonight was entertainment, a story for the barracks. But Sarah knew, one touch, and the balance would flip. The silence within her was so dense that anyone paying attention might have felt it was more terrifying than a scream. A draft swept through the door gap, brushing the UH-60's body with a low hum, like a warning only she could hear. The flashlight froze again, locking onto eyes that didn't blink. She didn't flinch. She didn't bow. Light met gaze, and in that instant, the one holding the beam suddenly felt as if he were the one being seen. When the flashlight cuts out, who will truly see the dark? All right then, my dear audience, if you're still here and finding this story gripping, drop a comment with the number 1, or say, I'm still here, so we can keep going together. A rough finger dropped onto Sarah's shoulder like a hammer blow against silence. No threats, no shouts, just one touch, and everything ignited. In that instant, the air inside the hangar seemed to crack, stretched taut like steel wire ready to snap. Sarah didn't hesitate. Her chair pivoted, wooden legs screeching against the concrete. In one smooth motion, her right hand shot up, clamping down on the recruit's wrist. Her left hand, sharp as a drumbeat, drove straight into the solar plexus. The recruit's breath choked midstream, eyes flaring wide in shock before dimming. His knees buckled, and his heavy frame collapsed like a sandbag cut loose from its rig. She didn't waste the fall. Sarah dragged the body forward, turning him into a living shield. The thud of bone striking bone echoed through the empty hangar, blending with the jitter of a flashlight slipping in another's trembling grip. The beam wavered, scattering light across Sarah's face for an instant, revealing a gaze that was cold, steady, and unshaken. The two in front froze. They no longer saw a woman grabbing a midnight meal. Before them stood the limp body of their teammate, repurposed into cover. The swagger in their steps faltered, retreating half a pace, as if they too could smell the stench of their mistake. Sarah held the shield a few seconds longer, long enough to track every angle left to cover. Her ears caught the scrape of boots, the ragged breathing, the flashlight rattling in a nervous hand. Each sound became a signal. In the dark, she didn't just see with her eyes, she saw with her entire body. The remaining recruits still hadn't processed what had just happened. For them, it was too fast, less than 3 seconds. But for Sarah, it was more than enough time for muscle memory, carved into her by thousands of hours of training, to fire like preloaded code. Every move flowed into the next, with zero waste, like the first beats of a driving score. The hangar was still vast, but Sarah's battlefield had shrunk to a circle. 3 men before her, a UH-60's bulk at her back, and the human shield she'd just dropped. Far off, seabirds cried over the bay, their voices faint against the night. Inside, the flickering light made the tension cinematic, every gaze locked, every twitch of movement a potential crescendo. For a fleeting second, irony brushed her mind. If that security camera in the corner was working, this would look like a trailer for a high-budget action film. But the thought vanished as quickly as it came. The fight wasn't over. The body in her grip grew heavier, sliding down. Sarah let him fall, stepping back half a pace, stance solid, breath steady. The whole hangar tightened into silence. A bead of sweat fell from the hand gripping the flashlight, its tiny splash on the floor louder to him than any shout. To the recruits, that was the terrifying sign. Their opponent didn't scream, didn't tremble, didn't even issue a threat. Only precise movements and indifferent silence. And that was what crushed the spirit faster than any strike could. And before we dive into the next part of the story, don't forget to hit subscribe and like this video. Oh, and be sure to drop a comment below to let us know where you're watching from. We'd love to hear it. The crack of boots echoed sharp when the second recruit lunged, his bulk like a live dumbbell hurled across the hangar. His fists swung wide, not just the recklessness of youth, but blind faith in brute strength. Yet, as the gap closed, Sarah pivoted her hip, dropped low, and spun halfway around. The movement was clean, almost fluid, as if she were gliding instead of resisting. His own force turned back on him. A thunderous crash shook the concrete when his weight slammed to the floor. The faint tang of iron dust and fuel oil vibrated through the air, underscoring the impact of failure. Sarah rose upright again, shoulders square, balance unbroken, as if no wave had ever hit. The third recruit refused to stay still. In panic, he yanked a metal pipe from his pack, steel flashing in the dark. The whistle of air against metal sounded like a blade tearing the night, reckless but clumsy. Sarah stepped back half a pace, just enough to slip the strike and harness the momentum. Her hand clamped his wrist, turning in smooth circles, converting the sloppy swing into a spiral with no escape. Dragged off balance, his legs slipped. His body spun sideways, crashing into an empty fuel drum by the UH-60. The hollow boom rang out sharp, reverberating across the hangar's steel frame like a warning bell. The sound filled the silence with something heavier, as though even the helicopter itself had borne witness to a secret exposed. Now only one remained. His hand gripped the flashlight, its beam trembling like a flame in strong wind. He hesitated, eyes wide, half doubting what he was seeing. Sarah didn't wait. She advanced. Each step solid, deliberate. A swift motion, her hand seized his wrist, twisted to a precise 45 degrees, a fundamental lesson known only to the strictly trained. A dry crack split the air. The flashlight clattered to the floor, rolling, its beam flickering a few times before dying out. In that moment of pitch black, Sarah brushed him aside, and the last body collapsed like a heavy cloth slipping from its rack. Silence. Only the wind sneaking through the hangar doors and the cold tang of metal remained. All four lay scattered and still, pieces of a broken puzzle. Sarah stood tall, her hair stirring faintly in the draft, smoothing the crease of her uniform as if she'd just finished a drill, not a fight. The lunchbox on the UH-60's wing was untouched, not a single grain spilled. 18 seconds, no more, no less. The entire fight sealed as tightly as it began, so quick that if anyone replayed the security footage, they'd suspect the tape had been sped up threefold. It wasn't a brawl, it looked like a performance, each beat precise enough to chill. But the quiet wasn't the end. As Sarah breathed evenly, eyes scanning the scene, a sudden prickle traced her spine. Not from the fallen men, not from any clear threat. It was instinct, the same instinct that had saved her countless times. Somewhere in the dark, she knew she wasn't alone. Those moves, the pivots, the throws weren't just imprinted in the memories of the four who had fallen. Another pair of eyes had watched it all from the shadows. She had ended the fight in 18 seconds, but had someone else witnessed every moment? The last echoes of the fight hadn't yet faded, when a new rhythm rose, measured, steady, unhurried. Each footstep struck the hangar's silence like a drumbeat, making the vast space feel even heavier. From the far end, a tall figure emerged in the faint, flickering light of the fallen flashlight. It was the squadron chief. He didn't rush in to break things up, nor did he look alarmed like an officer stumbling upon chaos. Instead, he had been standing there all along, quietly watching, like a strict examiner at a secret test no one knew had been arranged. His eyes held no anger, no surprise, only the calm recognition of someone who had seen more than enough. 4 recruits lay scattered across the floor, their ragged breathing like a broken chorus. Sarah stood upright, shoulders square, breath steady as if she were midway through morning drills. She didn't glance around, didn't explain. Everything seemed to remain in her order. The chief stepped closer, stopping just a few paces away. He glanced down at one of the recruits struggling to sit up, then lifted his gaze. His voice was low, steady, but needed no volume. "That sweep? Who taught you?" It wasn't an accusation, it sounded like a half-statement, as though he were simply waiting for her to flip the final card. Sarah stayed silent. Silence was its own reply. She didn't need to justify, didn't need to boast. With a small motion, she tugged lightly at the edge of her dress uniform, revealing the faint outline of a tattoo on her back. The blurred lines of eagle wings wrapped around the seal insignia, stamped deep like an unyielding seal. The flashlight's glow was fading, but the image was clear enough, impossible to mistake. That mark could never belong to chance. The chief nodded slightly, a small gesture, but within it was acknowledgement, not of the strike, but of the identity. He had seen these movements before at Coronado, witnessed them in the mud, the sea wind, the endless hours of unforgiving drills. Only those who had endured the full gauntlet could turn them into instincts so natural. Sarah said nothing more. She didn't need to. The truth was no longer something that could be hidden. The shadow she had carried, thought to last longer, was now exposed under the gaze of seasoned eyes. The air in the hangar grew heavy, but no longer with tension, rather with the weight of a secret laid bare. The 4 recruits remained sprawled, unsure whether to feel ashamed or lucky just to be breathing. Sarah stood silent, letting the truth wash past her like the quiet tide. The chief didn't have to say another word, but his eyes carried a different answer. He knew, and he would remember. The question was no longer whether she was SEAL. The real question now was, how far would the consequences of this spread? You're still with me, dear viewer, right? Take a moment to pause, maybe grab a glass of water, then stay tuned for what's coming next. If you find this story gripping, drop a comment with the number 1 or write, "I'm still here." And don't forget to hit that subscribe button. A week passed, and it seemed the hangar incident would end with 4 recruits marked for internal discipline. But then, something no one expected surfaced. On the military's internal network, and soon after, on public forums, a piece of footage spread. Not the shaky clips secretly filmed on phones, but a chillingly smooth recording, pulled directly from San Diego hangar's own security cameras. The screen at first was nothing but a jittering flashlight beam. Then the frame cleared, Sarah's small figure in the vast emptiness, 4 young men circling. Viewers saw every pivot, every sweep, every muscle straining in decisive motion. No music, no effects, only the raw thuds echoing, as if from a leaked classified file. Unlike the grainy phone videos a few junior officers had stashed, this footage was sharp to the point of cold. No room left for doubt or speculation. It looked like a martial arts training demo, but the setting was a midnight hangar, and the lead wasn't an instructor, but a sailor in casuals with a snack after drills. The veteran community reacted immediately. The clip spread at lightning speed. People called it a new Navy urban legend, a living myth in the digital age. In cafes for the retired, they passed the link around like a relic. The laughter was gone, replaced by slow, thoughtful nods. A former pilot who'd flown in Iraq typed under the clip, "Respect doesn't come from rank, it comes from skill. And from discipline." That comment was pinned to the top, like an unofficial caption for the whole footage. In the days that followed, the name Sarah all but vanished from the discussion. No one knew who she was, and no one seemed eager to break the secrecy. They referred to her only by image, the female SEAL in the dark, the woman on the flight line. Legend always carries more weight than truth when it's wrapped in just enough fog. But for the Pentagon, this wasn't bar talk anymore. The video hadn't just circled among veterans, it had leaked wider, becoming fodder for military press, even slipping onto late-night television commentary. The issue wasn't 4 recruits being taken down. The issue was this: security footage from a highly restricted system accessible to only a handful had leaked. And in it, the identity of a special operator was no longer hidden. In a closed Pentagon briefing, the big screen played the video back for the 10th time that morning. Senior officers stayed silent. Every slow-motion rewind, every sweep, every pivot by Sarah hammered home the same truth. She couldn't keep living as a shadow. Someone sighed, someone else smirked, but everyone knew. Not acting was itself a decision. To keep hiding her meant plugging dozens of security leaks and praying no more footage escaped. To use this meant turning the legend into a strategic tool, an icon, an unexpected face for recruitment. Meanwhile, somewhere in America, Sarah remained silent. She didn't watch the clip, she didn't go online, but she knew. Every time she stepped out of her apartment, the quick glances of strangers told her the story had already slipped beyond control. What will the Pentagon choose, bury her deeper in the shadows, or raise her into the light as a new banner? The wall clock in the Pentagon read just before 2 a.m. Fluorescent lights poured down on the long table buried under files, printouts, intel reports, and the glow of open laptops. Inside the conference room, not a soul looked tired. The air hung heavy, like stale smoke lingering after a long watch. On the main screen, the San Diego hangar footage played again for the 15th time that day. Sarah's pivots, her precise sweeps rolled in slow motion. The room was silent, broken only by the rustle of papers and the unconscious tapping of a pen against wood. A silver-haired general, past 60, leaned on his hand, voice gravelly, "You've all seen it. This name can't be hidden any longer." Across the table, A young officer from the communications strategy team jumped in. "With all due respect, sir, this isn't a failure. It's an opportunity. The entire country is witnessing something that, until now, was only rumor. A female SEAL, active in combat operations." A bitter smile flickered across the general's face. "An opportunity? She's an operator. Her job is to exist in silence, not to be a front-page face for the press." A civilian official cut in, tone sharp. "We're in an era where what spreads online moves faster than any briefing. If we don't control the story will control us." Tension thickened. Some pushed to pull Sarah from all activity immediately, lock her down under classified status, cut every contact. Others saw potential. If Sarah stepped into the light under control, she could become the face that reshaped the Navy's image. A statement that women could stand equal in every arena, even in the special operations roles once thought unreachable. The debate dragged on. Voices pressed, fingers jabbed, chairs scraped back and forth. One young officer, unable to mask his excitement, said bluntly, "We can turn a mishap into a strategy. Put her at the center of a recruitment campaign. The American public wants to see this." Opponents warned of danger. "You forget she's still active duty. This isn't an actress in a promo film. She's a warfighter. Any exposure means the enemy comes looking." The atmosphere hung like a double-edged blade. One step forward could create an icon. One step back could lose a priceless asset. Then, an admiral who had commanded countless special operations, silent until now, spoke. His voice was low, steady, cutting clean through the noise. "You're all debating as if Sarah is a chess piece, but I've seen her kind on the battlefield. The question isn't what we want, it's what she's ready for." The room fell still. No one argued, because he was right. The final decision came hours later. They would not bury her, but neither would they throw her naked into the spotlight. They would build a path, turn the leak story into a controlled recruitment strategy. While shielding sensitive details, Sarah would become the face of a new Navy program, centered on naval aviation, the same stage where she had appeared in the footage. A civilian exhaled with relief. Some officers nodded. Others sat in silence, eyes distant, knowing this decision meant Sarah was being placed into a new kind of war. Not a battlefield, but the arena of public opinion. Not bullets, but flashbulbs, cameras, and endless questions from the press. At one corner of the table, someone muttered half in jest, "This fight might be harder than raiding that warehouse in Fallujah." A few dry laughs broke out, then died away. When the screen finally went dark, the room still pulsed with unresolved tension. On paper, the choice was made. But in every heart, worry lingered. Could a warrior forged in shadows survive the glare of the spotlight without losing herself? Sarah could survive the battlefield, but can she survive the public eye? The early morning San Diego sea breeze blew cold, sweeping across the banners newly hung along the base's fence line. On them, Sarah's image appeared not in the heat of combat, but standing quietly beside a gray UH-60, her gaze fixed straight ahead, steady, no smile, no performance. Behind her, in the shadows, the faint outline of eagle wings inked across her shoulders emerged like a hidden seal from a lifetime of relentless training. The bold letters, short and uncompromising, read, "Any line, any mission, women belong." In aviation academies, base hallways, even on flyers handed out at recruitment fairs, Sarah's face became the focal point. Not a Hollywood star, not a polished media figure, but living proof. A female SEAL could stand in places once thought impossible. Young service members stopped in front of the poster where they would normally just glance. Here, they lingered. Some even raised their phones to snap a photo. A few chuckled under their breath. That night, in the hangar, maybe it really was her. Rumors wove their way through the ranks, turning into a new urban legend. The Pentagon had chosen the path of no return. Instead of hiding Sarah, they let her step into the light carefully controlled, just enough to send a message, just enough to keep the necessary secrets intact. Sarah never went on television, never gave interviews. Yet that silence made the image carry even more weight. No embellished words, no scripted speeches. Only the truth. A woman once told she didn't belong on the flight line, now standing tall on the Navy's very own recruitment poster. In training classrooms, instructors began referencing the leaked footage not officially, but everyone knew. They used it as an example of discipline, control, and the kind of strength born from silence. The 4 recruits from that night became living proof, punished yet retained because Sarah had asked for it. Now they stood before new candidates, retelling the lesson in humble tones. In the rare quiet moments, Sarah still sat alone at the end of the flight line, where the ocean wind carried the smell of fuel and the distant hum of old rotors. She never sought the spotlight. But she understood, legacy is not something you choose, it's something that chooses you. From a single silent night in the darkness of the San Diego hangar, she became the beacon lighting the way for those who would come after. The posters outside the base were more than images, they were milestones. From a single night in the darkness of the San Diego hangar, a female SEAL had stepped into the light. Sarah never sought attention, yet it was her silence and discipline that became a voice louder than any slogan. This story isn't just about strength. It's about respect, something too often forgotten in the very places that need it most. Respect for comrades, respect for tradition, and respect for the person behind the uniform. That is the lesson Sarah left behind, and the gift of healing for those who had been overlooked, doubted, or told they didn't belong. But you see, when light shines, darkness doesn't necessarily disappear. It only retreats, waiting for another chance. Sarah had gone public, becoming a symbol. So what will happen when the past she once hid tries to resurface? Will this new legacy be strong enough to stand against forces that don't want it to exist? If you're watching from the US, share this story with a loved one, a former teammate, or anyone you think needs to hear this message. Let them know that true strength isn't found in noise, but in control and steadfast resolve.